What if the people who built the pyramids weren't who you think they were? What if everything you were taught, the skin tones in the textbooks, the artistic reconstructions, the neat timeline in history class, is just a simplified mask placed over a story that's far older, wilder, and more diverse than anyone imagined? Because the truth is, the real builders of ancient Egypt didn't just come from one place. They weren't one look, one tribe, one single bloodline. They were a collision of worlds, and we only found out because of their DNA. For a long time, history liked to tell a very clean story. Ancient Egypt was presented as this neat, isolated miracle sitting along the Nile, a civilization that somehow just appeared in the desert, built incredible monuments, then vanished. But history is written by those who get to hold the pen. DNA doesn't have an agenda, and in the last couple of decades, genetic science has started whispering things that rewritten textbooks never mentioned. When scientists finally tested ancient Egyptian remains, real samples from mummies and burial sites, something shocking appeared. Their DNA carried links to sub-Saharan Africa, the Near East, the Levant, the Mediterranean, and even early European populations. Not one origin, many. Imagine it for a second. The Nile River wasn't just a source of water. It was a highway of human movement, a living artery connecting Africa to the Middle East, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Traders, farmers, travelers, refugees, warriors, lovers. Generation after generation mixing along the riverbanks. Now hold that thought because this part matters. Before we go further, this is exactly the kind of truth we chase every day on GenealogyX, where history meets DNA. Subscribe now so you don't miss the stories written in your own blood. Picture the land itself, not just hot sand and pyramids, like the movies show you, but green riverbanks, tall reeds swaying in the wind, floodplains where rich soil created some of the most fertile land on earth, people farming together, speaking different languages, praying to different gods, falling in love, having children. The ancient Egyptians didn't just build a civilization, they became one, slowly, together. Archaeology now shows that long before the pyramids existed, small communities were already living along the Nile over 10,000 years ago. These early people were not uniform. Some carried African lineages that stretched deep into the heart of the continent. Others carried genes linked to ancient Near East. And every time the Nile flooded, wiping away old borders, people were pushed together. That's how civilizations are born. Not from separation, from intersection. Then came the age of the pharaohs. By around 3100 BC, Egypt finally united under one ruler. The crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt became one, and the world witnessed one of the greatest transformations in human history. But here's the twist most people don't know. Even the earliest pharaohs didn't have a single look. Wall carvings and burial analyses suggest skin tones that range from deep brown to olive to lighter complexions. Hair types varied, facial structures varied. Modern Egypt became a genetic crossroads even before the word Egypt existed. And now DNA confirms it. In 2017, a major genetic study of ancient Egyptian mummies revealed something that shocked historians. Ancient Egyptians shared more genetic similarity with ancient Near Easterners and Mediterranean populations than modern Egyptians do today. Why? Because over the centuries, Egypt experienced wave after wave of migration, invasion, and empire. Nubians, Hyksos, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Ottomans. Every wave left DNA behind. Egypt never stopped changing. It never stayed pure. And that's the most beautiful part. The people who built the pyramids weren't separated from Africa. They were connected to it. They weren't separated from the Middle East. They were tied to it. They weren't isolated from the world. They were the center of it. Now think about the workers who actually raised those impossible stones into the sky. For years, you were probably taught that slaves built the pyramids, that oppressed bodies were dragged through the sand, forced to create monuments for kings. But excavations of workers' villages in Giza tell a different story. These weren't slaves. They were skilled, paid laborers, craftsmen, families, bakers, doctors, engineers. They were buried with respect. They had medical care and regulated diets. They were proud of their work. And DNA taken from some of these burial grounds revealed varied ancestry even among the pyramid workers. This wasn't a single tribe sacrificing themselves for a god king. This was a diverse nation, unified by belief, ambition, and shared survival along a river that gave them life. Second big revelation. Many people assume Cleopatra looked like modern movie versions. Light skin, sharp features, almost European in presentation. But Cleopatra wasn't purely Egyptian. She was part of the Ptolemaic Greek dynasty, descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals. Yet even within the Ptolemaic line, there was intermarriage with local populations over centuries. Cleopatra's DNA, had we been able to test it fully, likely would have shown Greek, Egyptian, North African, and possibly even sub-Saharan African ancestry. Not one look, a mixture, just like the civilization she ruled. Third discovery that flipped assumptions even more. Some of the oldest mummies tested genetically showed something even older than Egypt itself. Genetic links to prehistoric populations that lived in North Africa before the Sahara turned to desert. That means Egypt's story doesn't even begin with the pyramids. It begins with a green Sahara, a land filled with lakes and wildlife thousands of years ago, people migrating as the land dried, following the water down to the Nile. Egypt wasn't built out of nothing. It was the memory of a lost world. Genetics also reveals something deeply personal for us today. If you've ever taken a DNA test and seen North African or Middle Eastern or Mediterranean in your results, there is a real chance your ancestors once walked along the same riverbanks as those ancient builders. There is a chance your bloodline once stood in the shadow of a rising pyramid, watching stones pull up towards the gods. Would you want to know that? Would that change how you see yourself? Because once you understand this truth, the lines on modern maps start to feel meaningless. Borders disappear. Races dissolve. You start to realize something powerful. Modern Egyptians still carry pieces of that ancient DNA, mixed now with Arab, Nubian, Mediterranean, and African bloodlines over centuries. Their DNA tells a journey of invasion, survival, resilience, and rebirth. And people all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Americas, might also be carrying tiny silent threads of that same story. A fragment, a memory, a whisper. You might be part pyramid builder, part priestess, part farmer, sailing the Nile. Not because of fantasy, but because DNA proves that ancient civilizations didn't vanish. They scattered, blended, and became us. The temples, the art, the sacred symbols, they weren't created by an other. They were created by humans. People who laughed, struggled, loved, feared death, worshipped the sun, and hoped their names would live on. And in a way, they did. Through their DNA. Through you. So ask yourself this. Would you want to know if your bloodline crossed continents thousands of years ago? Would it change how you see the color of your skin, the shape of your face, the place you call home? Because the truth hidden in Egyptian DNA teaches us something bigger than history. We are not separate stories. We are one long, moving, breathing human journey. From desert to river to city to you. And somewhere in yourselves, the past is still alive, waiting to be remembered. If you've enjoyed exploring how DNA overturns the myths of history, subscribe to GenealogyX. We uncover 2 DNA mysteries every day that reveal who we really are.